Dorothy lived in art her entire life. Every day she was making. She was seeing things and thinking and sculpting with her hands. So her work is really from this place. She lived in a home that was intimately connected with the outdoors, and she was very intentional about creating that relationship. And so I believe you can't separate an artist from their environment, and you certainly can't separate Dorothy's work from this place. When Dorothy and Bob founded Stone Quarry Art Park, they had two main goals, and the first was to make the land available to the public, and the second was to support artists and make this land available to artists. And they didn't have children, and they were thinking about their legacy. They had lived here for about 50 years at that point, and it was important to them that when they passed on, that this would be available to a broader audience. The Hilltop House and Studio was originally built, designed and built by Dorothy and Robert Riester, husband and wife. Bob was an engineer at the Carrier Corporation, and Dorothy was an artist. And they found this land in Cazenovia. They were living in Syracuse at the time. They were looking for a place to build a summer home. They settled on this hilltop up here. They camped the first 3 summers to get a sense of the landscape and where they wanted to place the house. Dorothy designed the home to overlook Cazenovia Lake, and it's built as a cone on its side. So the broadest part of the home is in the front, and then it narrows back to a fine point in the back rooms. In the 1970s, they moved here year-round, and at that point, they added a library to the building, which is it's an octagonal-shaped addition to the home. Stone Quarry Art Park now stewards the home and the Riester collection and archive, and we open the home up to the public for tours and events and programs. We also allow our visiting artists to engage with the home, both as a structure and an architectural marvel, but also as a work of art and a piece of sculpture in and of itself.
I think most people, when they come into the Hilltop House, they immediately think of Georgia O'Keeffe and Georgia O'Keeffe's place. And I think that there is a kind of connection between the sort of way of living that Dorothy embraced and undertook, and how O'Keeffe lived. You know, this kind of a lifestyle and a creating of a place that really foregrounds creativity.
As soon as she stepped into her home, she would tell stories about building it. Some of her favorite stories were constructing the fireplace. That took her 3 times. So the first time she built it, she was all excited. Her husband came home for dinner and she said, "Ta-da!" And the whole thing collapsed and fell on the floor. So I can still hear her voice in my head telling that story. The second time she built it, she forgot to include a smoke shelf. So they lit a fire and the entire house filled with smoke. And then the third time she got it right. Opening the door and walking into the Hilltop House is my favorite. It never gets old. I especially love opening the door and bringing in new visitors to the Hilltop House that haven't seen the home before. And that moment where you open the door, you step into the space, and it just, the colors and the vibrancy overwhelm you. And then immediately the fireplace. And I just hear Dorothy and her kind of giggle in the back of my head as she tells me the story of making the fireplace, or the story of putting the barn wood on the walls and going to the barn and disassembling it and collecting the wood, and then putting the wood on their station wagon and it collapsing the roof of their car. If Dorothy had an idea, she found a way to make it happen.
She talked about being a student, you know, and it was fine for women to draw and women to paint, but it wasn't so fine for women to weld. But she was determined. I think that's one of her kind of long-standing hallmarks is tenacity. You know, she didn't give up. If she wanted to do something, she would figure out how to do it. She preceded me at Cazenovia College. You know, I knew that she had been there, and I think she'd been teaching ceramics there. So this was before we had a sculpture facility at the college. And there actually was not a lot of 3D taught there before I started teaching there, aside from ceramics. So I was determined to teach a sculpture class. But the only place that was available as a studio to teach in was a garage. And I was just, it was really hard to imagine being able to offer a kind of valid experience in the garage. So I was just sort of at my wit's end. I called Dorothy. I explained the situation to her. She listened, and then she said, "You have to do it." I was like, that was not what I expected you to say. I have to do it? She goes, yes, because if you don't do it, nothing will happen. You have to do it. And not only do you have to do it, you have to do it large. So you do it, and then you have a big show on the campus so that everybody knows that you've done it. I said, okay, I'll do it. And I did exactly as she said. And fast forward, now we have a fantastic sculpture facility. And I'm sure if she hadn't pushed me, if I just sort of backed off and said, no, it's too hard, the story might be different.
It's really about the ethos of Dorothy. She believed in fun and play and found art in everything. And we really try to demonstrate that openness and that playfulness. We try to create a place that is engaging, that people want to come and spend time in, that's comfortable. And really the idea that everything is open to creativity and that everyone should have opportunities to access art and nature.
Well, Dorothy had a great deal of respect for both art and nature. And as an artist, she looked at everything as art or as design, I think we could probably say. And it didn't matter what she was looking at. I mean, she could be looking at a toilet paper tube, or she could be looking at a tree branch. And they both had the capacity for design. Because of that, you know, she was determined to kind of maintain a balance here between nature and sculpture. So you don't see art every 2 feet at the art park. You have to look for it a lot of times. Some of it's obvious, but some of it is really well hidden. And a lot of it is temporary. You know, it's there for 2 years and then it disintegrates.
We're very fortunate at Stone Quarry Art Park to have Dorothy's finished artistic products, some examples of that, but also all of her sketches and drawings and maquettes or small-scale models. So a lot of the large-scale sculptures on our grounds, especially the sculpture around the immediate Hilltop area, are Dorothy's. And what I love is going through our collection and finding small models and drawings and sketches of those larger sculptures that you can see her process. You can see how she changed or altered an idea before she built it in its final form. She was very active. Right up to the day she died, she was making art. When she couldn't weld because they wouldn't allow her to have a welding torch in the retirement home that she lived in, she would make art out of whatever she could find. So she made these incredible sculptures out of orange peels, paper towel rolls, and cereal boxes that she would take out to her porch and spray paint, just always creating and thinking creatively.
You know, she was very old and very shaky. I visited her a number of times at the Nottingham, and her apartment which was, so much smaller than any other place I'd ever seen her in, was just full of her creations. She had a dining room table that was just mounded up with lots of bottles of Tight Bond glue, which was her favorite adhesive at that point, and curls of orange peel, toilet paper tubes. I brought her a lot of little small wood cut-offs from our wood shop at the college that she liked to make sculptures out of. Sticks, spray paint, you name it. It was anything that she would look at and think this has some kind of aesthetic value was on that table. And then the constructions would get made, and then they would be placed all over the apartment. So it was full. It was full of sculptures in progress and sculptures that were sort of finished. She would have some people who would come and help her spray paint things on her little patio. So it was constant. I think from the moment she got up to the moment she fell asleep.